Morning.
I hope you are all well this morning.
Morning, Skura.
Morning.
Morning, Bongeka.
Hi, Lindsay.
Morning all. Morning, Lindsay.
Hi,
Morning,
Tom.
everyone.
Morning.
Morning, everyone. We'll just go straight to it. Thank you so much for joining. Today we have Bongeka Mnguni sharing her story today. So Bongeka completed her undergrad and postgrad studies at UKZN and is a registered professional architect. She's the current chairperson of Women in Architecture in this institute. She believes this role is an extension of her purpose, which is centered in advocating for the voices of the unheard. She has served as a master's as a mentor at UKZN for 4 years, where she's been assisting students studying architecture to progress academically. She has worked at the National Department of Public Works as an architect, where she was nominated the most innovative young professional in the country. She's currently an associate director at a SAIA design workshop, an architectural firm that contributes immensely to providing equitable and dignified buildings to the marginalized. The firm believes in designing spaces where communities can find pride and a sense of ownership, which is in line with her philanthropic outlook towards architecture. She's a mom of a 7-year-old daughter and hopes to make an impact in the industry so that others who come after her can walk on greener pastures. Bongeka, over to you.
Thank you, Skura. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Okay, morning everyone. Thank you to Skura for inviting me. I'll start at the inception of my life, I guess. I was born in 1994. My parents were married in 93. Both from Northern KZN. My dad's side is from Inongoma. His grave is actually about 5 kilometers from the Royal Zulu Kingdom. My mom, also based in Northern KZN in Ulundi, Emahlabathini. I was born in Dundee and later on progressed and migrated down to Durban, which is where I'm most familiar. Schooled here, primary school, high school, and then on to university. So I'm providing this context to show you how far and wide and how long it takes to be an architect. And also, up until I actually applied for architecture and got in and started my first year, I'd never met an architect, let alone a Black female architect. Also never been taught by one. So also how I even got to know of architecture, it was an innocent assumption. And because in high school, I was really good at maths and I loved physics and I loved art. And I thought, well, the closest course that could combine all these three would be architecture. And I think I was partially right. Yeah, so that's how I basically stumbled upon architecture. So I went to an all-girl high school where studies such as architecture and engineering aren't promoted. At that time, if you go to an all-girl school, we didn't have access to technical drawing and subjects like that because it was assumed that girls aren't interested in those type of career streams. And I'm hoping in this day and age that has definitely changed. So moving on to my undergrad studies, I shared this meme here that says, not sure if depressed or just an architecture student. I think a lot of us can relate because it's just a long process where you don't know if you're coming or going. So in my first year, we had been told that we were the biggest class or intake, which was abnormal for a course like architecture. So there are about 100 of us that were accepted into first year. And all the other years used to joke around and say, actually, that our class also had the most Black people, which was weird. But at that time, I didn't really understand the system. I didn't really understand what that meant. And later on, I was exposed to it. I volunteered to be class rep for my class because I don't know, I just had this idea that if we were considered the minority, I don't want to be in a corner not having access. I want to make sure that I represent those who feel that they don't have access. So later on, as I progressed through first year, second year, and every other year, I was voted as class rep every year until I actually became president of the student council. So some of the nuances that came with being in a class like this, I felt that the institution was attempting, obviously, to blur the lines of inequality by making sure that they provide access to those who haven't had access before. But allowing people access doesn't always mean that the issues that come with inequality will always be immediately addressed. So what I mean by that is, it's that feeling of when you know you're invited to a table and you have a chair, you have a seat, but once you sit at the table, you can't actually afford to order anything off of the menu. And as much as we're ticking the boxes of balancing race, balancing gender, but the economic aspect, which was a reality, still had far-bearing effects. So some of the issues that I won't go too deeply into that I discovered that came with being part of this course is that if you are from an impoverished background or from a rural area, firstly, also if you aren't from a school that has English as its first language, it's going to be very hard to grasp architectural concepts or architectural theory and architectural jargon. So I think those are the type of issues that drew me to mentoring and tutoring so that I could help those from those type of backgrounds. And also the reality that studying architecture is very expensive, besides just the actual fees, but printing and making models, if you're just on a standard NSFAS, bursaries don't understand that why you need so much money. You know, if they are of the opinion that if you have a textbook, you should be able to study. If you have money for food, that should be enough. But in courses like these that are quite elitist, if I can say, it's quite difficult. So I'm just painting the background of some of the reasons why I got into the spaces that I've gotten into. So one of the comments that I got in my final portfolio was that one day I'd make a really good politician. And I was offended by that at first because I thought, well, is being a politician regarded as such a bad thing? And isn't architecture in its own right political? Because space is political. So it's those type of comments that really influenced how I sort of perceived or saw what my impact would be in the built environment space. So I was on a bursary from National Public Works from my second year. In my first year, my mom actually had to resign so that she could pay my fees so that I could actually get that bursary. So the benefit that came with the bursary was that I would be afforded an internship so that I could register with SACAP and become a professional architect. So part of that, obviously, because National Public Works at the time didn't have the scope to train architects, they would second you to a firm that does work with public works. and you would then work there for a year or two, and then eventually come back to work with Public Works. So I worked for a firm called Designscape Architects. Their sort of scope and projects that are involved in quite commercial, also a lot of residential. The project that we're actually doing with Public Works was the Durban High Court. And the funny story behind this project was that, well, before my time, the project that was awarded to them was actually an R&R of a toilet block in the court building. And eventually the scope got revised and it was changed, and it became additional accommodation, renovations of the court building, and eventually a new parking building. And that increased to a project that is now over 600 million rand. So I was overwhelmed by just that thought that it costs 600 million rand to actually build a building. So it's getting in touch with the concepts of what it means to actually put up a building. So during this time, I was just doing submission drawings. I was also the rendering queen in the office. I was also one of the only females in the office, and the other female was an intern just like me. So we were happy to be navigating the space together. The misconception that I came across amongst other architects while I was at Public Works was that generally private sector architects don't understand what public sector architects do. They have a belief that public sector architects are just glorified project managers. Not too sure how true that is, but where I worked, we actually did do a lot of projects. There was a time where National Public Works couldn't appoint consultants for projects due to, I think, budgetary constraints or something that National Treasury stipulated. So the more, I would say, immediate projects that needed to be delivered, we would do. I think if they were under 50 million or 20 million, I've forgotten the actual cap, but we were doing projects ourselves. So pictured here, this is a magistrate court in Vryheid. So we were driving 8 hours a day every 2 weeks to run this project. So we had a fully running office within the Durban regional office. So that was pretty cool. And I think the most memorable project, now this was during COVID, we had to design, as a response to COVID, the Department of Correctional Services was obviously not facilitated to deal with COVID cases. And obviously hospitals were also overcrowded. So they thought that they could do a turnkey project to design an isolation facility within the means of correctional services, which was a weird concept for me, having to design a healthcare facility that is also meeting security restrictions, and also at the same time being a healing space. So I think at this time I just qualified as a professional architect. This was I was part of the class that wrote their board exam online for the first time. So yeah, there are a lot of conflicting ideas here. Obviously, this project never saw the light. There were lots of dodgy things happening during COVID, for example, digital vibes. So yeah, I was actually quite fortunate to have had this much exposure in a space where it is perceived that we don't do that much, but also started questioning what really is perceived to be a good architect. Is an architect just about putting up buildings, aesthetically pleasing buildings? Can you not be an architect if you are within the industry but not designing buildings? So there's just a lot of questions that started emanating from those nuances. And then along the line, I had a baby, and I also realized that it's also difficult to try and, not difficult, but it's frowned upon to try and start a family while you're trying to start a career. Because I think at this time, while I was pregnant, I got demoted off of a few projects. And at that time, it was made to believe that it was for my benefit, but I didn't think so, and I didn't have the guts to fight that, or the energy, really. And then during this time, there was a conference that I had attended, And I was really struck by this quote that says, by expanding design from its aesthetic sense to incorporate people, society, and quality of life issues, we shift the paradigm of architecture from the design of buildings to influencing the design process for solving problems in society. And I started thinking about what my role as an architect in the public sector would be, because I feel that I felt that I had a sort of a responsibility to start interrogating some of the policies that affect how we implement projects, how we implement buildings. Because as much as we have expenditure goals to reach, but what does that really do for the quality of life of the communities where we are implementing projects, if we know that it doesn't really serve the people per se. So the buildings that I've pictured here, the Apartheid Museum, the Constitutional Court, at that time, these were buildings that really, really inspired me in how they were able to include the narratives of our country that were not necessarily pretty, not necessarily aesthetically pleasing, but are truthful and also allow us to reflect reflect our society. So during this time while I was at Public Works, I was on contract, and then there'd be periods where I'd be unemployed. So I partnered with an ex-lecturer of mine. He lectured me in first year. His name is Bonani Shange. And so I was a professional architect at this time. We had a project in KwaMashu where we had to design, I think it's called social housing. So we were given 5 sites in an informal settlement area. And I'll just stop here. What I found to be problematic about this project was firstly how we navigated the sites. We were being led by councillors, which we believed are councillors of the area. And during the site visit, the councillors were driving around in BMWs and luxury cars, and they had bodyguards and they were guns. And I had thought that if you were a councillor, it means that you live in the area. I mean, I'm not judging, but I just assumed that when you choose leadership, you choose someone that you can relate to or that best represents you. And I don't think that leader needs to be protected from the community that they're serving. So that was interesting. The conditions of where people live in these areas are appalling. I took this picture just for a conditional assessment, but I didn't realize that there was actually a baby here. And yeah, I think that picture's self-explanatory. Poor living conditions. This project actually hasn't commenced though because of issues within the client department. But also it just made me realize how unfortunate the delivery of infrastructure and quality dignified spaces, how tedious it is. And yeah, this map here shows some of the sites that were identified, and we were told that we need to produce a certain number of units and that these buildings needed to be demolished, people's houses need to be demolished, and then these would be replaced by new ones. And obviously the first building would be built on a greenfield, and then these people would be moved to that new site. But then I also thought, what happens to the people around the sites? How do they feel when they see others moving into new homes? The politics of that. I mean, I'm not a human settlements like expert, but I just felt sad, to be quite honest. I don't have anything more intellectual to say to that, but it just made me feel sad. So yeah, during the stint, then I thought, well, I'm sort of partnering up with somebody on a few projects. What if I start my own practice? Obviously, I'm thinking about income here. Then I just ran a series of random projects. I designed my uncle's house, my mom's friend's house. And I learned quite painfully that when you sign a client architect agreement, you need to include a design change clause, because I don't know how many times I had to change these designs. And for some of them, I actually didn't even get paid. So yeah, to other young architects, that's that's a hint that I would share. So then during the time that I was doing my master's, I did a bit of traveling. This is in Bali. This was my first group travel. So I didn't really do a lot that I would have wanted to do because I was with a group, but saw some beautiful buildings, beautiful spaces. Also went to Hong Kong, saw some more beautiful buildings. Was quite overwhelmed by Hong Kong and how technologically advanced it is. Obviously, I'm coming from a third world country, so it was overwhelming, but also interesting to see how far my country could go, or where or what gaps we still need to meet. You know. Then later on, I was still doing my master's here. I went to Barcelona. This was a solo trip. I relate a lot to Gaudi's work, especially the La Sagrada Familia, which is a building that's still incomplete, because at this time I was struggling to complete my master's. But very layered building, very intricate building, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed walking the streets of Barcelona. I think the European approach to public space was quite refreshing, you know, seeing trees, being able to walk at night. As a Zulu girl growing up, we're told that intombazana iphume ebusuku, which means that as a woman, you're not allowed to be out and about at night. Well, that's for safety reasons, but it's quite a limiting perspective, which affects also how you move around the city, because you know that at a certain time, it sort of like adds a layer of fear that you need to be out of the city by a certain time because it's no longer safe for you as a woman. So yeah, I enjoy traveling because I get to be a little bit a little bit more outside of the box. So speaking of Europe, during one of the stints where I was unemployed, I was doing my own thing. I was approached by a gentleman named Kyle Sukwalela. He was in Belgium at the time. So he WhatsApps me and he says, "Hi, I got your number from an architect I know that you know in Cape Town, who's your friend. I'm looking for a young Black female to join a partnership with my partner. We run a firm in Margate," and he explains and explains and explains. And I thought, okay, in terms of all forms of practice that I'd learned about, you know, in school and what I'm privy to, I know that there's partnerships, there's sole proprietors and etc., but I'd never heard of anybody being invited into a partnership. So I found that very interesting. So we talked. So my interview was basically over WhatsApp. And then I met his partner, Umfundo. We went for breakfast and we just chatted. I knew of him because he was part of the CPD committee at SAIA KZN. So yeah, we had initial talks and then I joined them and I started to go on a tour on some of the projects that are on site at the moment or at that time. So the first one we went to was in Tabankulu in the Eastern Cape. This is a traffic department. I was really impressed. Also, I hope this building wins an award one day. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I was just really impressed by the fact that even though the context is in a rural area, but the design resolution or the aesthetics do not reflect that. So the space, that's this conical shape here, there's a boardroom. So if you need to get your license renewed, you're going for learners testing, etc., etc. This is what this building is about. This picture here is when it was unveiled and the Eastern Cape Premier was present. This was a very proud moment for the firm. So that was the first project that I had visited. And then I visited a project in Venda, which is in Limpopo. And this is a TVET college. So as we're going through these projects, I started questioning or started learning about their design identity and what mine would be, how those two would merge, if they would merge. I'm also still at an impressionable age, so I'm looking at those dynamics. I appreciated the materiality. Also started picking up how different architects from different schools design. They're both graduated from TUT, so it was interesting to sort of start debating certain aspects about architecture that, you know, I hadn't been exposed to. So a very, very beautiful building as well. Here we are pictured with some of the students in the area. And then the next project that I started actually working on was in Ituja in Eastern Cape. It is it's being used as a town hall. So at the time I was doing the heritage application. And I think there was just a bit of confusion as to what we actually wanted to do with this project. We had stripped down the scope to such a bare minimum that it started to feel like we're actually doing a cleanup job. We're just repairing and replacing, painting to match the existing, making good to match the existing. And then we had a bit of a debate of how this would contribute to future generations. What would people say about the space and what we had done as architects? And so, okay, I don't have a picture of the existing site, but on this front space is usually just filled with cars. There's no space for people to appropriate, to sit, to linger. So I think it was quite important for us to introduce that in. And as I'm learning about the project, I'm also learning about the office, which is based in Margate, which is SAIA KZN. Okay, in this picture here, we're actually debating about this the sketch that produced this over here. So our main gathering space are around Kaya's drawing board, which is a traditional drawing board, which I also thought was pretty cool. This office is actually very toxic because we're always eating, always eating, which is maybe toxic in a good way. But yes, constantly sketching, constantly. What I enjoyed as well was the design freedom, even though, I mean, I'm in between two principals in this picture. There was never a moment where I felt that, okay, maybe I forced my opinions in the beginning, but debates are welcome, conversations are welcomed, ideas are welcomed, and I enjoyed that. I also met the family. I also learned very quickly that their wives are the actual partners. They're just supporting their wives. I'm kidding. But yeah, our kids met. We were on the journey of becoming a family. My daughter and Kaya's son actually goes to the same school. So yeah, many happy moments. Also, I started to accept that, okay, if I am to join this partnership, it has to be for better or for worse. So what I mean by that is it felt good to hear, oh, you're part of this company, they're doing this project, and what. So that became part of, it was starting to become a part of my identity, but also accepted that when things go wrong as well, I have to take responsibility for it. So I can't say, oh, no, that was before my time. I wasn't part of the firm then. If somebody came to me with a problem, it also became my problem. So yeah, that's a bit on the office culture. I think you can see through these pictures how that goes. Then my first sort of projects in Umvoti, which is past Pietermaritzburg and KZN. So this is the picture of the site. This was a WhatsApp from Kaya because he had gone to site. The client wanted to basically do a temporary structure for mechanics who were fixing cars on the road because they had nowhere else to go. And as much as that was the brief, but I felt a responsibility to do more than that. Mechanics are often underlooked and disrespected, and I felt that I needed to give them a sense of important in designing for them. So I developed something that would become sort of a prototype that could be removed and also be placed somewhere else when they have a better site. So this would be container structures where on the first floor there would be other SMMEs, for example, people who are seamstresses, people who keep spare parts for the mechanics, and then also I housed some space here for some admin related facilities if you want to get an invoice, just to formalize the way they do business and for people to take them seriously. So then the client actually liked the idea and then went and looked for another site. And then it was going to become this much bigger development. He cited that he wanted something that looks like the container city. I think it's either in Pretoria or Joburg. So then, yeah, we had to look at how we can create some spaces in between these containers. Obviously, it's going to get quite hot there. So this is just a representation of what that might look like. It's on site now, but the design has changed because the site constraints have also changed. So yeah, I won't go too deeply into that. Then a project in Bloemfontein. So this was also still my first month. Kaya says to me, how would you like to design a hospital? Are you passionate about healthcare? Because he mentioned that he has no interest in healthcare projects. And I thought, oh, well, I don't have that much experience, but since we had somebody that we were going to be working with, I wouldn't mind extracting some knowledge, you know. So I flew down to Bloemfontein for quite a few weeks at a time. We designed, for our first meeting, we came with a proposal and we quickly learned, that's why I wrote here, client versus user versus architect. The client had given us a concise brief. We designed according to that brief. Then we met our clients, which are the doctors pictured here, and they had a completely different vision as to what they actually wanted and needed. So I learned very quickly there that it's always best to get both sides. Yes, the implementing agent is paying your fees, but it doesn't really do much justice if the end user is not happy. So this note over here was our actual brief. The doctor from the top of her head was able to write down what they actually needed, which wards, which facilities, and you can see that the sketch is here where the brief was changing. This is a picture of all the consultants and the team at the hospital. I'm one of the only young people here and the only Black female on the team, which wasn't intimidating. I think maybe because I've gotten used to being a minority, but it was actually quite a good team. Picture here of, so the one thing about hospital projects, there's not really any design freedom. You're designing according to IUSS standards. You're complying to all sorts of regulations, and you're also trying to design in a way where you're cognizant of the fact that people's lives are at risk here, and these people need to be able to work in a way that's going to be best for their daily tasks, not in a way that an architect sees fit. So it's a balance between understanding the people, understanding how they do their work, and then a design comes from there. So that experience was pretty cool. I don't know if I do a hospital project in future, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. Then a project we're doing in Mthatha. I think this is the first design and build, well, since I got here. It's a cannabis incubation hub. This project was exciting once upon a time. The client, I think it's quite problematic when it was quite unfortunate when the client doesn't really understand the role of an architect and what we're supposed to do, or they also don't understand that there's a budget. As much as we may have given you an image of what needs to be done, but if you don't have the money for it, it can't be built. So that reality kicked in quite quickly. So it's interesting to also understand the process of producing cannabis products. So there's an area where the stock arrives and it gets extracted, and an area for decortication, and then an oil is produced, and then that's how you get your cannabis product. So I think we are leaving site today, yes. This project was supposed to be 3 months. It ended up, I think, being just 5 months. But I was quite impressed at how we're able to, as an office, put this together. It also made me realize that being an architect doesn't end at just the drawings or instructing a contractor. When you become the contractor, that's where the knowledge gets really tested. Then a project we're doing in Mnguni, which is also the South Coast in KZN. So we have 4 sites. This project we're appointed just for the conceptual development. Somebody had already done the initial reporting stage. So we had 4 sites, and the client wanted us to produce some ideas of touristic attractions that could be proposed. There was Maulini Mountain, SAIA Mountain. This pictured here is Ich Elia Maria, which means the Virgin Mary's Rock. So basically the story behind the site is that a Sangoma, or traditional healer, had a vision that this place would be a space that people could come pray to and find healing. And in this very vision, when the traditional healer looked up at the sky, he saw a picture of the Virgin Mary with Jesus on his back. So people in this area are, they believe this story. I'm not saying it's not true, but this is something that they celebrate, that they practice. As you can see, that there are actually candles on this rock. So you hike quite a distance to get to this point. And so the client wanted to propose some like accommodation for tourists. And I started thinking about the fact that, you know, in my opinion, I didn't think that the site needed an architectural response. I think that the preservation of this area and the continuation of the practices or the activities that happen here are enough. To then put up buildings, to then put foreign structures felt unfair to the site. But yeah, we had to come up with something. So the concern with these sites is that it's very unsafe to hike. So we had to propose like a few platforms and put balustrading and steps so that you can actually access these spaces. So this is just a render of something that was proposed here. Try to keep the palette as textured and as muted as possible to match the rocks that are on the site. The other interesting site is called Isivivane Shaka, which Isivivane is in English a pile of rocks. So these rocks were thrown onto the mountain as a representation of all the fallen soldiers. And they wanted to construct like a memorial or a monument to represent this. So these are the 2 site plans where we had proposed. So we wanted to create sort of like a journey through the sites because the site is quite big. We also thought about, we didn't want to design a white elephant. So if holiday season is over, what would this facility do? So we thought about incorporating the community. Obviously, the most expected facility to propose would be, you know, your trading spaces and the restaurants and all of that. But then we thought of proposing something sort of like not really an educational facility, but one of these sites is actually along the route where learners walk home. So we thought of proposing something as like a temporary pause space where learners could do homework. And also we thought of it as like a communal gathering space where stories could be shared, and it could also act as a means of surveillance for the learners, because obviously they're walking on their own. So this would be like a communal space in Zulu. Well, in Zulu, we say that it takes a village to raise a child, and we felt that this space would become that village that guides the child. So pictured here are some of the precedents that we had used to commemorate the soldiers. We also proposed like an experiential tunnel where this would be like a simulation of the soldiers hiding in between the valleys and during this war space. We then also had to produce videos of this whole development. Obviously, I didn't do this video. I just wanted to shout out Alisa, Vuyokazi, Victor, Onati, and Bonga, who assisted with putting this together. Our office really pulls through when it comes to delivering renders. And then I also had to do the voiceover.
As Ubuhle steps onto the sacred grounds of Isvivan's Yashara Center, she feels the weight of history beneath her feet, mingling with the whispers of the past. This cultural village, once a revered campsite of King Shazul and his mighty army, now stands as a vibrant homage to Zulu heritage, nestled in the serene heartland of KwaZulu-Natal. Her journey unfolds at the entrance where the gateway beckons her forward, framing the rich experience that awaits. Entering, she's enveloped in the vibrant energy of the bustling ticket booth, alive with conversations about the profound significance of the site's history. Securing her tickets, she meanders through the lively market spaces filled with the tantalizing scent of local cuisine and the masterful craftsmanship of the community. Each stall a testament to the resilience and cultural richness of the Zulu people. Continuing along the pathway, she encounters an interpretation space adorned with rusty metal sheets, bearing the names of Kinshala's revered regiments. Here, she's invited to honor the memory of Zulu ancestors, while a tranquil, reflective space offers her a moment of quiet contemplation amid.
So that's just an example of the 4 videos that we had to do for each of the sites, because the client was trying to get funding to eventually construct these spaces. Then on to the next project, which is in Mossel Bay in the Western Cape. This project is for the development of a precinct plan by one of the port authorities. I can't really reveal too much about this project due to security reasons, but this is my first interaction with urban design, precinct planning. We have a whole team that I've actually only met the urban designers because we're working quite close with them. And it was my first time interacting with a development economist. So I was exposed to what a led process urban design is. So we're partnering with New Urban, and you'll see Gerrit Jordan here. He is the, I think, treasurer of the Urban Design Institute. So it's pretty cool engaging with him. This project is really, really tricky. So you'd expect that for a waterfront or a water's edge site, the most immediate response or proposal would be to do a mini V&A, and that's what the client had sold to us in the beginning. And we later found out that that's actually not what they need or require, and that's not really what the site requires. Their interests are more on the operations level. Yes, there are touristic attractions. There's also a lot of rich heritage in the area. And also, I think the other problem that I discovered when you have a client that doesn't really understand what an architect, what an urban designer does, and if they are more on the administrative part, expectations aren't met easily, and it's hard to meet them where they are, but we're getting quite close to achieving what it is that they want, even though we don't necessarily feel that that's what the site is asking for. I think that just adding more containers or more port operations doesn't necessarily benefit the public space surrounding the harbor, but what can you do? So yeah, the process of urban design is quite intricate, assessing the security network, the linkages within the city, exploring the land uses and the suitability of land uses. So you can't just propose a hotel if it's not suitable to the adjacent land use, looking at the movement network and traffic, proposing open spaces, and looking at the urban form in totality. So yeah, this has been a very challenging project. So my role in the project is principal agent. And then we have all sorts of engineers and the development economist. Kaya is actually the one with the urban design qualification. So this is a reminder to him that he should be leading this project, not me. But it's really exciting to be a part of something. I still feel very grateful, even though after a meeting, I'm just so overwhelmed because halfway through the meeting, I realized, well, I get a bit of imposter syndrome. And I asked myself, like, do I actually really know what I'm doing? But it turns out I haven't been faking it. I do know what I'm doing. And then our next project in the Eastern Cape, it's for a TVET college. We had 5 sites where we had to do 5 master plans for their facilities. So our client is Ingwe TVET, but we are working with Kucha, who's the implementing agent, and it's been a very painful project. We had to obviously go and assess the sites and see what their needs are, and also then look at what the growth projection is for the student intake, for staff, so that we could propose accordingly. A lot of calculations, a lot of sketching. Yeah, it's just unfortunate when you're working with people who don't really respect what you do. Also don't respect that it takes time to do what you do. So when I presented the implementation plan for this project, I had assumed that we would have other consultants appointed and that we would obviously follow the program because we have different milestones. And I think I'd estimate about at a minimum 4 to 5 months to do some of these master plans. And I remember during the meeting, one of the Kucha representatives said, you know, they have a deadline to submit to Treasury because this project was for them to be able to get proposals so that they can apply for funding at Treasury. And he said to me, well, their deadline for Treasury is in 3 weeks. So we basically have to do these master plans, 5 campus master plans in 3 weeks. And yeah, after this or during this, I actually burnt out because it was too much work, too much guessing. We didn't have other consultants appointed. Their in-house team was just going to do engineering reports, which weren't going to be helpful to our process. We couldn't get the studies done that we needed to be done. So yeah, I don't want to be so negative so early in the morning, but it's the truth. This has just been a really painful project, but we did our best. Then Port Edward, this is a residential project. This is not my first residential project in the firm, but it's the first project where the client has just been a breeze. He is obviously looking at doing this development as an investment. It's not going to be his primary home, so I think that's why I've gotten complete design freedom. So the interesting thing about this estate is that there's suspicions that there's a mass grave of about 500 slaves on the coast of this project, of this estate. And so there are some pretty hefty restrictions on some of the sites. The state actually told me that up until 15 years ago, they were still finding bits and pieces of porcelain and glass on the beach, in which they suspect was on the ship. And at some points, the Portuguese government actually wanted to buy this land from them, but that didn't materialize. So I found it quite interesting that the developer continued, knowing that there could be possibly a mass grave here. But anyway, so I navigated through the estate and I found the site, the client's site. When I got to the site, obviously it's quite overgrown, but I had access to surveys and things like that. And when I looked at the initial map, I felt that what the site wanted me to do was to ensure that I retain as much of the trees as possible. And upon arrival into the space, you want to be able to have a clear access and see the end from the beginning. So I put the sketch here, which is what I drew at first. I didn't know how it was going to pan out, but this is what I was actually just listening to my intuition. But what I wanted to create was a house that would be open out to the courtyard for you to be able to experience the courtyard from all points of the house. The estate requires that you follow Balinese architecture and the influences in passive design and materiality. Yeah, so this is what it turned out to be. This is the view from the entrance. So the house is completely openable from all points. You walk across from the living area to the kitchen, through the courtyard. I wanted to force the user to use the courtyard. So it's not something that's just an ornament that's standing in the house. So the whole house revolves around this open courtyard. And then I did a bit more traveling. This is in Tunisia. I was really inspired by I wanted to just get an experience of North African architecture and the Mediterranean and the Islamic culture. So I was quite surprised to find that there's a lot of Roman architectural influence and heritage as well. So this is one of the ancient Roman baths.
Arbre d'Antonin. Tout ce qu'on voyait en face, c'était les sous-sols, la partie réservée au personnel. À l'époque, il y avait un étage et le bâtiment faisait à peu près une vingtaine de mètres.
I was overwhelmed by the fact that no English is spoken in this country. So it was a very last minute decision to come here, but it's absolutely beautiful. So whenever I travel, I like to travel to places that are not landlocked. I'm not interested in countries that are landlocked. I always want to be by the water's edge. So yeah, also quite a beautiful country. I then also went to Istanbul and Antalya, which is interesting because Turkey actually spans between Europe and Asia. So I got a taste of both. Very interested in art, so I got to see some mosaics. The detail is just breathtaking. This is inside the Hagia Sophia. So what made I chose to go to the Hagia Sophia because in second year we actually had to draw all these buildings by hand. So it was good to see this live. And then this is just an original sundial, which was pretty cool. And this is inside the blue mosque. It's quite amazing to see what was achieved architecturally with these buildings. The Blue Mosque is actually right opposite the Hagia Sophia, and the Blue Mosque was built in competition with the Hagia Sophia. It's much bigger, it's more elaborate, and it actually stands, I think, much higher than the Hagia Sophia. So listening to all that history was also quite interesting. Then I also went to Antalya in the old city. So I like to stay in the more ancient regions, just to get a sense of the history and do a bit of touristy activities. And then I think this is the second to last project that I'm showing. This is in Umzimkhulu. So back to the questions that I'd been asking about design identity between the three partners. We had a project where we had 3 sites along the, I think it's the R53, the R61, I can't remember, but it's that main road passing Umzimkhulu. So the clients just wanted to develop, okay, for each site there was a different brief. My site was just to develop the taxi rank. I think Bundo's site was to do some workshops, and then Kaya's site was also to develop the taxi rank. But for mine, I felt a responsibility to look on the outside of what was happening on this site to also inform what would happen here. They just wanted to propose trading stalls. And I looked at what was happening in the community. So when you drive past here, you'll notice that there's lots of students just lingering on the guardrails, I think that's what they're called. There's nothing else that they can do. There's no recreational activities. And I also thought it was just unsafe for young people to be lingering like that, which feeds into a whole lot of other social ills that I won't get into. So my proposal was a holistic approach to improving the surroundings and not just focusing on one aspect of it. And I I know that they're not going to like this, but I asked the office if they have an opinion on how the three of us design, what are our different philosophies. So this was Undo's design. He proposed some trading workshops for economic development. And then Kaya's, I think it's a taxi rack. And then he created like a market. But yeah, there's just also an element of agricultural promotion as well. So what I found interesting between the three of us is that we all actually have different approaches to designing, but they come together quite holistically. Kaya always says he's a landscape urbanist. Not too knowledgeable on what that actually means, but I can see it through his designs. He's also quite ambitious with what he proposes, depending on the client as well and the budget. But since he knew that he didn't have a budget here, he was quite ambitious. He actually admitted that he knows that this wouldn't work, but it doesn't hurt to do something that's unconventional. And yeah, I think, yeah, I included this just as a comment back to what I had mentioned earlier on. And then back to Durban. So here I'm just as a conclusion included all the stuff that I do in between practicing. And it all stems down to the Bongeka that I was in first year. You didn't know what architecture was. You didn't know a Black female architect. And in a way, I feel that as much as voluntary work is hard, it's exhausting as well. But I do feel that knowing very well some of the issues that we face and some of the injustices that continue to happen, I feel that my purpose is aligned to making sure that I play my part. I just feel that that's just my responsibility. It's not solely mine, but I'm just doing the best that I can. So this picture here is my daughter joining in one of the women in architecture meetings. Sometimes she acts as our minute taker. This webinar here that was my first public speaking platform, where we were speaking on, I think this was about 2 years ago, where we shared some of the critiques that we have of the industry as young females. And looking back now, sometimes I question the relevance of my work, whether it's needed, whether it's valid. In 10 years' time, will there still be a woman architecture committee? But as long as the stories that we keep hearing still are reflected and mirrored in students today, I feel that the question shouldn't just be whether voluntary work is necessary or is relevant, but it is crucial. The process of transformation is not immediate. It's unfortunately a negotiation, an ongoing negotiation, and we all are. It's not an architectural response, and it's not the response of one body, to contribute to transformation. But we all play a role, and we also all play a role in making sure that it manifests. So yeah, I've done quite a lot of career expos. I've done some work with DUT. And yeah, I just hope to make or be a part of something that creates a better space, like I said, like Scora said in the introduction, for those that come after us. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bongeka, and great work and nice story behind it. Congratulations to you and Kaya, Simfundo and Kaya here as well. Bongeka, if you could talk a bit about the engagement you had with the president, what was that about?
So because I was a beneficiary of, so I don't know if you know, but there's this metaphor that the president likes to use of Inswalo. It's a story of a young Black child who grows up from a rural area, and because of the transformation that has happened in this dispensation, she's afforded better opportunities. And it was, so then I was invited as someone who's seen as a Dinswalo, because I'd gotten a bursary from the government. It was to track the trajectory from then and what impact that had. So when I addressed the president, obviously I shared that, I am a beneficiary of this and this, but I am still a part of a space that needs your intervention. It shouldn't just be we just sit and clap hands because somebody got a bursary and then they got employment. But there's so many other issues that still exist. Like I was saying that addressing inequality isn't a tick box exercise, just because I am one of the few privileged who were able to study and graduate and work. There are others who have fallen behind due to the system and the structural elements that are in place that perpetuate the issues of inequality. So yeah, I think I had like 5 minutes to, how they say that if you were in a lift with the president, what would you say? So it was that type of thing. So I think I spoke for like 5 minutes where I spoke to him about, yes, I've come this far and etc. But there's a call to be more intentional about what we do about young Black people once they are in a certain industry. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And it's quite interesting that you mention the existence of women in architecture as something that should it be something that bridges the gap or tries and levels the field now, or will it be relevant in the future or not? I think it's a very pertinent question to ask. But as things stand, Bongeka, you've mentioned that you are, as a female, generally a minority, and it's good that you are involved in school programs and bring architecture to more young girls in schools. What do you feel is needed to do that, to bring more females into architecture? What do you feel is needed, especially from backgrounds where people grow up not knowing architecture? Because in reaching out to schools, you actually could find a person who may not have heard at all about architecture if we don't have the outreaches that we do as the institute. How do you feel we could eventually close that gap in your view?
It's going to take more than just us from inside the industry. So it goes back down to the community level. Yes, so for example, the story that I'm thinking of now is how most NSFAS beneficiaries will receive funding, will go to school. And this is something I've picked up also while I was mentoring students at KZN, that as much as they have this funding, there's this guilt that they feel that they have access to money to buy food while they're at res, but back at home, there's no money for groceries. There's no money for maybe her siblings to go to school. So the inequality is a structural issue. Yes, what we are doing helps, but if we do not have the support back at grassroots level, it's hard to sustain the underprivileged in a stream like architecture. So a lot of people that I know that probably didn't continue with architecture from first year. So like I was saying, there were 100 of us and only like 30 of us graduated. It's issues like that where someone knows that they can't study for a full year, knowing that they could go get a job at a restaurant and help their family immediately. They can't wait 3 years. Their families can't wait 3 years. So if we start becoming more, what's the word, multidisciplinary in our approach, or not use a singular tunnel vision approach of, hey, we can just give this person a bursary, they should be fine. It takes more than that. It takes, we need to apply ourselves and be more intentional about how we assist people and how we view that assistance. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I also don't have all the answers. I'm just doing that bit that I know that might help somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bongeka. Colleagues, you are free to interact, ask questions and comments. Now, Bongeka, because I work a lot with transport architecture, or a few years ago, as it were, the things were much better. I learn a lot when I travel. I look out a lot for trains and public transportation, etc. How does traveling inspire you, and how do you apply it to your development as an architect?
How does traveling inspire how I design? Is that what you're asking?
Or what's your takeouts? What do you look out for, and how do you feel it has enriched your process as an architect?
It's opened my mind quite a bit to the possibilities of what can be done. Also, and not even like on a macro scale, just on a micro scale. I'm looking at public space, for example, how if we had better policies and if we had a better perspective on how we see the informal economy, I think that it maybe wouldn't solve a lot of issues, but I think that people would be able to be more empowered. So I'm thinking about, like, okay, where I grew up in Pinetown, whenever you walk in the town or in the CBD, traders are trading on the streets. And because the law says that, okay, I don't know what the law says, but whenever when I'd walk past them and then a cop like vehicle drives past, they'd all scurry and go hide away and pack all their stuff. So And my assumption is that if we had better laws governing informal trading, like, and maybe if it became more formalized, I think that would be beneficial to so many other people. So for me, it allows me a chance to compare what we are doing and what's being done out there. Because also, obviously, we look at the Western countries for precedents. We look at the Western countries for guidance. And also, not everything that the Westernized countries do is applicable to us. So when I look at transportation, for example, it's amazing traveling with the advanced transportation system, the trams and the trains and all of that. But applying it in KZN, for example, where the taxi industry is infamous, but also in reality feeds a lot of families. So negotiating between those two ideals is tricky territory. Obviously, I don't know a lot about what's happening with those developments. I'm just aware that they are happening. So for me, it also reminds me that it shouldn't be a copy and paste exercise. When I do see a beautiful building or something that's been designed well, in the spaces that I travel in, but is not necessarily something that I should enforce when I'm designing. But another thing that I do appreciate when I'm traveling is the ability to move freely without fear, without necessarily feeling that I don't belong. I'm not too sure how that has been enforced in the countries that we travel to, but it's something that I also I guess I need to ponder on as well. And how do you feel a sense of belonging, a sense of pride to the buildings that you design? Yeah.
Great, a mouthful. Sichaba Ray and then Mandisa. Sichaba first. Sichaba, you may mute yourself. Okay. Shaba's not there. Ray.
Audible, Chair.
Okay, sure, Shaba.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. And Bongeka, thanks to you for sharing your journey. I think it's quite inspiring, and the body of work as well. It's quite impressive. And I also maybe comment your partners like and Mfundo for really affording you the opportunity to thrive and shine, and really also for being so intentional about transforming, you know. And I think that opportunity is not only about architecture as a profession, but it speaks to the transformation of the built environment as a whole. And I want to commend them for that. And I think as well, you know, if there are students in this discussion, it is not a norm to see a Black female architect as young as yourself. You know, as an associate director, especially, you know, of a highly productive office like your office. So I want to ask, you know, how would you advise young upcoming, you know, architects, those who have not graduated and those who have just graduated, right? Particularly those of color, because most of us, if not all, you know, we are the first architects to come out of our families, right? Whereas our white colleagues have an architect or two in their families or by association who are highly experienced. And for me, it has seemed, you know, quite less challenging for them to navigate, especially around academics and ultimately the profession. Thanks.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
that, Shaba. Bongeka.
Mr. Chaba. I think that's an important question. Firstly, I do agree it is it's not common for a person like me to have this opportunity. and I'm very grateful for it. What I would say to somebody who is in the system right now, or who's about to graduate, or has just graduated, because also like I said, I never met an architect until I studied architecture. No one in my family is an architect. I think I'm the only person in my family who has a master's degree. I think that firstly, don't be afraid of your voice. I feel that it's, especially for women, we're made to feel that maybe we complain too much, we're always angry, we're always emotional. Emotions are okay. I think that we try too hard to conceal those. And some of our buildings aren't very emotional as a result. I would say that don't be afraid of your voice, don't be afraid to speak up. But also, we as people who come from a certain background, an impoverished background, we are used to struggle, but I wish to encourage people not to perpetuate the struggle post-graduation. So what I mean by that is you do not have to be, you don't have to endure an environment that is toxic just because you're desperate for work. You do not have to endure an environment that doesn't. Oh, okay. I thought someone was speaking.
Sabina, could please mute yourself? Please continue.
Yes. So it's also about mental like emancipation that comes with coming from poverty. I think that we get abused and taken advantage of very easily just because we are desperate for opportunities. So I would say that be self-aware. You are qualified for a reason, you've graduated for a reason, no one did you a favor, you worked for that. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know it all, be willing to learn, but at the same time be able to negotiate your position in a space. Yeah.
Thank you, Ray.
Morning, Bongeka. Congratulations to you. I have actually enjoyed your presentation. I pick up a lot of points. I've been around in the architectural field now for 5 decades. I don't want to say to you I have any experience. You basically learn by the day, and especially when you're working in difficult areas. I fully agree with a very important point that you raised, that transformation is a negotiable process. Females, males, and all architectural students should actually hold that in the mind, to say that that is the way we can actually make progress. I'm actually the founder of an architectural voluntary association for the first time in the undeveloped township area, where there were never any voluntary associations. And I'm sitting with a membership of just about 120 members. I'm very, very happy to say that we have 11 females and 8 students, which brings us up to about 19 females in total. You are very, very right when you say that some of the difficulties students face, especially in difficult areas, are when there is no money for groceries, inequality issues, the bread and butter issues. I add to that and I say, bursary is not just the way forward. You're quite right. There's so much security problems around. I think almost every part of South Africa, gender-based violence is very, very high. And I have just associated, apart from another program, I've also just communicating with a group of the gender-based violence team, where we are basically busy designing many centers around South Africa as a plan. And I think these are issues. So I want to say, in advance, that we as architects should be very, very happy first to our advantage that we have a very advanced South African Council of the Architectural Profession, SACHAP. We're a stakeholder there, and at the end of the day, I find that the council is very, very amenable, where they listen to you, they come to your door. I was at a meeting once in the SACHAP offices when one of the architects raised up, it's time for us to come out of the office and go on to different areas to see what are the difficulties. And I fully agree with, and I enjoyed your presentation, because I think, you know, making sure, you know, we can help develop our beautiful South Africa. I just want to talk about a point that you raised, where you brought in the mechanics, that you were designing some projects for them, and how true that is, because in the townships, there is no opportunity for any work, jobs or anything, and be that as it may, you know, people have to, you know, bring bread on the table for the families. So you're quite right. I like when you spoke about the container designs, the storage requirements, and the daily happenings around repairs. As South Africa stands right now, I see it. I'm very, very happy to be part of a developing team. And at the same time, I want to indicate to you that South Africa needs help. We are the architects. We should come up with initiatives and basically make sure we support SACHAP as that it is a platform that basically allows negotiable processes, and every incoming architect or student should feel very, you know, very happy to associate with SACHAP. And thank you. I think I enjoyed your chat. Compliments to you, Bongeka.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray. Amandisa?
Thank you, Skura. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Bongeka, for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. And also your journey is very inspiring. We appreciate that. And mainly that you find your voice, you speak with intention, with what you are doing and what you plan. One thing that captured my attention also is when you said that architecture is political, and you mentioned when you traveled abroad and you managed to walk in the night. And one thing that I've experienced with some of our social backgrounds, that those limitations that come from our backgrounds also limit our growth in architecture and input. I was once invited to attend a match on a soccer stadium. And in my adult life, I think I was in my late 30s. It was the first time I actually attended a match in a stadium. And because you find that girls are not really into soccer, you don't really attend social stadium matches. But when I attended that match, one thing that captured me was the stadium design, how you actually go to the change rooms, how the players come out. And I thought to myself, if I had to design a stadium, how would I, if I haven't even walked into one? So when you spoke about women not being able to walk at night in the social background because of whatever was said, and also in this context now of South Africa of crime, you find that even in architecture, when you have to design lighting, if you haven't walked at night and you saw how lighting functions, how are you able to design that? So that really captured my attention, to say that some of the social backgrounds, architecture is political in its nature, and we appreciate your contributions. I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you, Skura.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mandisa.
Mandisa. Archie?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Bongeka, for your beautiful, well-rounded presentation. I think someone earlier on asked what advice would you give to young girls who want to follow on your footsteps in the architectural profession? I just want to testify on the type of character that you have displayed since I've known you. So I've known Bongeka for a few years. We were colleagues when she was in the Department of Public Works. And I think we both came from private sector. Oh, well, I didn't come into the program through a bursary, but I came in an incubation program. But Bongeka was always focused. She went to all of our engagements with an open mind. She learned very quickly, wasn't afraid of asking questions. And it wasn't a thing of, oh, we're working for the state, we're going to drag our feet. We were always learning, asking to go to the best trainings. If we knew there was a new program, we'd want to go and learn new things. So no matter where you find yourself, or where she found herself, I think she did her best and maximized on her opportunity. I'm very glad that you actually spoke about working for the state and us being very hard worked, traveling many hours, because a lot of people normally just overlook working for the government because they say that your career is going to rot. But if you have a good outlook and you have a vision for your life, you will always be working for the state, but you're also working towards your own vision. And I think that's exactly what Bongeka did, and that helped her to be where she is today. And I just wish you all the very best. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ati. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you for the comment, Ati. Is there any other comment or question? Bongeka? Minkyu?
Greetings, Chairperson, and greetings, Bonge.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so happy to see you after a long, long time. I don't know how many years it has been, but I've enjoyed your presentation. It's very inspiring. I think the whole journey, people know you as Bongeka. I like to use Usenamile, because it still reflects on my head your presentation, the journey, the trials and tribulation in the studio. Look at you now. Really, I'm very impressed. I respect you for who you have become. And yeah, that's all I want to say. Congratulations and thank you for the presentation. Mamgod.
Thank you. Manky used to lecture me in second year. So yeah, as a lecturer, that means a lot to me. It means so much to me.
Thank you, Bongeka. Bongeka, just in rounding off your talk, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Where to from now on, just in conclusion?
Well, this talk was titled A Season of Firsts. So I feel that I've experienced a lot of significant or unique projects, moments, as I described in the summary, that have set me on the path that I'm on right now. In terms of what's going to happen next, I think it'll just be a continuation, firstly, of what it is that I'm currently doing, but multiplied. And my project now is to make sure that there are others that I can reach out to, because I don't have a mentor specifically right now. And I want to make sure around me that I build a community of not other Bongekas, but others who are going to come out of their corners to take up space and show up. So I think whatever it is that I'll be doing or wherever I'll be, it's always going to be, I'm prophesying that it's going to be successful, but it won't mean anything to me if in 10 years' time I'm still the only Bongeka that people know, there should be others studying with me. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. I wish you all a very good weekend.